Welcome back to the ThinkorSwim tutorial series. In today's video, we'll be going through all of the most popular drawing tools inside of ThinkorSwim. We're also going to go through how to create shortcuts to access them more quickly, and go through customizing the appearance and settings of the drawing tools themselves. Now, I'm going to keep this video as brief as possible, only focusing on the most popular of drawing tools, but if you guys need to jump ahead to a specific drawing or topic, check out the timestamps down below. Now, jumping right into the platform, before we can even talk about the drawing tools themselves, we should probably go through how to actually access them. Now, just like everything else on ThinkorSwim, there are quite a few different ways to pull them up. Now, my preferred way does require a mouse, and specifically a mouse with a little scroll wheel in the center of it. If you do have a mouse with a scroll wheel, just go ahead and put your mouse on the chart somewhere. Click down on the scroll wheel just like it's a button. As soon as you click on it, it's going to bring up a drawing tools submenu. And all of these little icons you see here are different drawing tools that we can access simply by clicking on them. Now, I'm sorry if you do not have a mouse with a little scroll wheel, you're not going to be able to access it this way, and it is my preferred way. I think it's the fastest way. Now, if you don't have a mouse, don't worry, there are quite a few different ways to access the drawing tools. And I'm going to show you how to create another shortcut at the top of your chart that may be even quicker than this method. Now, the next one we'll talk about is simply looking in the lower right-hand corner of your chart, you're going to see a little cursor icon. And it's a cursor because that's the current tool I have selected. Now, if you click on that icon, it's going to bring up the same drawing tools menu that we just saw before. Same icons, same tools. Just like before, you would simply click on the icon that you want to use. Now, the next way to access the drawing tools is up in the upper right-hand corner of your chart. You're going to see that same little pointer icon with the word drawings right next to it. If you go ahead and click on that drawings tab, you're going to see a submenu pop up, and we're going to look for the one called drawing tools. And to the right of that, you're going to see the same drawing menu pull up just like before. Now, the very last method for those of you on a laptop or using a Mac is to pin the actual drawing tools up to the top of your chart. Now, in order to do that, we've got to find the chart settings button, the little gear icon in the top right-hand corner of your chart. From there, once we actually pull up the settings menu, we're going to look in the lower right-hand corner where it says My Tools, and it currently says Off. We're going to go ahead and click on that submenu Off, and we're going to click on Each Chart, and we'll go ahead and click OK. Now, as soon as we click OK, you're going to see a little menu pop up on the top of your chart. Now, this is not specific for drawing tools. It does give you the ability to add styles and studies as well. And what it does is give you a little quick access to each individual tool or each individual study, whatever you need to put up there. Now, in my case, you can see that I've edited this a little bit from the default. You can see I've got the pointer tool, the Trendline, rectangle, and Fibonacci retracements up here. Now, if you wanted to add additional drawings or maybe a study to this little toolbar up here at the top, all you have to do is come over to the right-hand side and click on this little gear icon. From there, you can then either remove drawings you already have up here or add new ones with the Add button. Now, if we wanted to add a new one, we're just going to go ahead and click on Add a Button. We're going to say a drawing tool, and in this case, we'll go ahead and add the arrow. And you can see it immediately pops up there as the last button on our toolbar. Let's say we wanted to get rid of the pointer, we don't find it as important, we'll go ahead and click on it and delete the button. Now, if we're happy with the drawings up there at the top, we'll go ahead and hit Done on the right-hand side. And if we wanted to use one of these, like we wanted to create a trend line, we would simply click on it, and now we've got access to the tool. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but if we move our mouse away for a few seconds, you're going to see this toolbar disappears. So if we move our mouse down here, wait a couple seconds, you see it disappears. What you can do if you always want to see those drawings at all times is you can put your mouse back up here and click on this little pin icon. That's going to pin the toolbar to the top of your chart. So if you move your mouse away, it's always going to be up there. Now, because I've got the mouse method, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this on my screen for right now. But now that you guys know how to do it, you can put it on there on your own time. Now that we actually know how to access the drawing tools themselves, use some of the shortcuts, let's go through some of the most popular drawing tools in ThinkorSwim. So again, I'm going to go ahead and bring up the little tool submenu. And now that I've got all the drawing tools selected, you're going to see there are quite a few. But to be honest with you, you're not going to use the vast majority of these. Now, the ones that you're going to use most often or most frequently are actually in the top right here in these 4 boxes. Now, starting with the very first one, that's called the pan icon, looks like a little hand. If we go ahead and click on that, what the pan icon is going to allow you to do is scroll the chart left or right. So what you're doing right now is you're scrolling through the time axis. You're going back in time. Now, to be fair, if you have a mouse with a little scroll wheel, I could simply use the scroll wheel to go right or left as well. Or I could use the little scroll bar at the bottom of my chart down here to scroll left or right. Now, I'm not sure if you guys noticed, but as I scroll left or right, I am scrolling through the time axis, and you'll also see the price axis is adjusting according to the candlesticks on my chart. If we didn't want it to adjust the price axis as we move left or right, we always want it to be static. What we can do is come up here to the top right-hand corner of our chart, click on this little squiggly line here, and we're gonna go ahead and change it from auto to manual. Now what that allows us to do is yes, scroll left and right, but what you're gonna notice is it doesn't move to fit the chart into our graph. So we're not able to see the top of these candlesticks right now. But now, since we have the pan icon selected, we could actually pull up and not only control the time axis left to right, but also the price axis up and down. Now, if we want to go back to auto, we want to go back to the standard viewing that we were just looking at it before, we can just double click on our chart and it'll take us back to auto, back to the standard view. Now that's the pan icon. There's nothing crazy. It's basically just to move around the chart. The next one up is, again, nothing too crazy. It's going to be the pointer icon. The pointer icon is going to be in the top right, looks like just like a normal cursor on your mouse. What the cursor icon is going to allow us to do is actually zoom in on a specific time frame or a specific set of candles. Now the way that you use that is by clicking and dragging. For example, let's say we wanted to zoom in on this section right here. All we'd have to do is click and drag and highlight, and whatever we highlight, when we let go of our mouse, it's going to zoom in on that section. Now again, if we wanted to zoom out, we could just double click on our chart to zoom all the way back out. If we wanted to zoom in on the most recent price action on Microsoft, again, we'll just click, drag, let go, and we zoom in on that section we just highlighted. Now, just like with the pan icon, if we were to come up to the upper right-hand corner and switch this from auto to manual, not only could we highlight a specific time frame, we could also select a specific price axis as well. So let's say we wanted to zoom in on this price action, this time frame right here. All we'd have to do is click, drag, and highlight, and you're going to see that it not only highlights time axis, highlights price axis as well, creating like a little square icon. When we let go, we're going to zoom in on that specific section we just highlighted. If we double click, we'll zoom all the way back out. Now, for the most part, I would typically just leave this on auto up here. I want to see all of the candlesticks in the chart that I'm looking at. I want to be able to see all of the price action. But if there's a specific candle that you're trying to really get a hyper-focused view on, then using manual could be a useful tool to you. So I wanted you to know it's here. Now, the next one up is actually going to be our first drawing that we talk about. It's going to be the little line icon here, and that's going to be your trend line. And it might be the most common drawing tool you use inside of ThinkorSwim. So let's go ahead and click on it. You're going to see immediately that my cursor icon switched from the little pointer into a little pencil. And that means that we actually have a real drawing tool selected. Anytime we click, we're about to create a new drawing. Now, in the case of a trend line, in order to draw the line, we have to pick two anchor points, our starting point and our end point. And remember, there's no clicking and dragging. We don't want to drag it. We want to find 2 points, click, click. So for example, let's say we wanted to draw a trend line on this period right here. Let's say we wanted to go to the top of this candlestick. We're going to click down, and it's going to create our very first point. We're going to come down to the bottom of this candlestick. We'll click again, and we see that a trend line was just created. That skinny little red line on our chart. Let's go ahead and do that one more time. Let's say we wanted to get from the bottom of this candlestick to the bottom of this candlestick. Now, before I actually click on the second point, the second anchor point, I want to make sure you see that little dialog box on the left-hand side. In that box is a lot of relevant information that you may or may not want to know later down the line. Now, the very first section tells you the time period that we have selected. So the time period between our first anchor point and our second anchor point. Currently, that's 5 hours and 57 minutes. Which in the case of the chart we're looking at right now is 358 bars or 358 minutes. Now, the next one down says plus 0.21%. That means from our first anchor point to our second anchor point, Microsoft is 0.21% higher. And the next box down tells us 0.62 cents. So our second anchor point is 62 cents greater than our first anchor point. And then finally, it tells us the angle of the trend line we're about to draw, 20.57 degrees. Now you'll notice as soon as I click on that second anchor point, the dialog box disappears. But we can make it visible by changing the trend line settings. Now in order to change those settings, what we have to do is go ahead and right click on the trend line, and we're going to go up to Edit Properties. Now this little dialog box is where you're going to change all the settings for the trend line. This is where you could make that label continuously visible if you wanted to. You could change the color of the trend line, the style of the trend line, and even the width of the trend line. Now let's just go through these one at a time. The very first one up here that you're going to see is arrow type, and it currently says none. Now if you click on that dialog box, you're going to see that it's got like a left facing arrow, right facing, and then both sides of it. All that does is add an arrow to the end of your trend line. In the case of the arrow type we just selected, it's going to add an arrow to the left-hand side of our trend line. So if we go ahead and hit OK, you're going to see a little arrow at the end of our trend line here. Now, next up, let's go back to Edit Properties. We can see that it also says a label position on the left. And keep in mind, the label is that little dialog box that showed us time, price, percentages. That's what we were just talking about a few seconds ago. That is the label. And currently we have it selected to show on the left, but we're saying show label never. So what we could do is make a few little tweaks to that if we wanted to. We could click on this word never and change it to always. Now once we hit OK, we're always going to see that little dialog box on the left-hand side of our trend line. But you might find that a little bit distracting, so what we could also do is go ahead and set that to hover, and it's only going to show us the dialog box when we hover our mouse over the trend line. We could also tweak where this dialog box shows up, whether we want it on the left-hand side of our trend line, in the middle, or on the right. And it's a very similar process. We would just click on the label position and either switch it to on the right or in the middle in this case, and now you see the little box show up in the middle instead of on the left. Now, some other things you can adjust on the trend line itself. You can also change the left extension and the right extension. Basically, do you want that trend line to continue forever to the right or forever to the left? That's what the extension is. So if we wanted that trend line to continue forever to the right-hand side of our chart, we're going to go ahead and turn on this right extension, and we'll go ahead and hit OK. You can see immediately that trend line now goes on forever to the right-hand side. If we wanted to get rid of it, we would just right-click on it again, edit properties, and turn off the right extension. You can also see here that you can be very nitpicky with those anchor points. You can change the start anchor point, the end anchor point, and you can be incredibly specific. Maybe we wanted that starting anchor point to be exactly $300, and we could even change the time frame and the exact hour or minute that we wanted that trend line to begin. And then finally down below, we could even change the appearance. So if we wanted our trend line to be a white line, we could go ahead and change it from red to white. We could change the style to a dashed line, and we could also make it a little bit wider so we can make it a little bit easier to see. We'll make it a 3 and we'll click OK. And we just changed the overall appearance of the trend line itself. Now, one other cool thing we could do, we can come up here to edit properties and we could save this as our default. Meaning anytime we draw a trend line going forward, we want it to look exactly like this. We want it to be a white line with an arrow on the left-hand side. We want it to be dashed, a width of 3, and we want that label to show up in the middle of the trend line when we hover our mouse over it. If we go ahead and hit save as default, we click OK, the next time I draw a trend line, it's going to look exactly like this. So let's go ahead and try that. Click on this point right here, click on a point here, and you'll see it looks exactly like the last one we drew. Now, if we wanted to set it back to its default, which is just this red boring line with the 1, all we'd have to do is right click on this, edit properties, reset to factory default, hit OK, and now anytime we draw a trend line, it's going to look like this, normal red line. Now, in order to remove those drawings, it's very easy. If you want to remove it one at a time, just right click on the drawing you want to delete and say remove drawing. Now, if you want to remove all the drawings from the chart right now, you could also just right click on the trend line, come down towards the middle and click clear drawing set. It's going to ask you, are you sure you want to delete all of them? We'll say yes. And our chart is back to normal, none of the drawings on there. Now that was the trend line. The next one we're going to talk about is the price level line. Now the price level has a little dollar sign over the line at the bottom, and this is really what you would use for support and resistance. So what we're going to do is go ahead and click on that to open it up. You've got the same little pencil icon for the cursor. And just like before, we're going to click on our first anchor point and then our second anchor point in order to create the support or resistance line. So for example, let's say we saw this as our resistance level. We're going to go ahead and click on the top of this candle up here, come over to the right, and we'll click on the second anchor point. Now in this case, you can see that the default template is to continue all the way to the right forever. If we didn't want that to be the case, we didn't want it to extend to the right, we could just quickly right click on this line and say cancel right extension. Now, if you do have the right extension turned on, you leave it on the default, you actually don't have to click the second anchor point. For example, let's say I thought this was my level of support on Microsoft right here. I could just double click where my mouse is at, and you can see it extends all the way to the right. There was no need to find that second anchor point. Now, the problem with this is if you decide to turn off that right extension by right clicking, cancel right extension, you're going to see that your line basically disappears. You probably can't even see it on your screen, but there is a tiny little red dot here, which is our price level line, but not really useful in this case. So we'll go ahead and delete it. And keep in mind that if we wanted to have anchor points, if we don't want it to extend indefinitely, we do have to pick that second point in order to make sure it works the way we want it to. Now, to adjust the properties of the support and resistance lines, the price level lines, we just have to do the exact same thing we did before, and that's just right click on the drawing we want to edit. After we right click, we're just going to go to edit properties, and it's going to bring up a very similar dialog box that you saw before. Now, the main difference with this one that you're going to notice is it does allow you to show the name of the drawing. For example, let's say I wanted to call this my resistance line. We'll go ahead and throw in the name up there, resistance. And what I'm going to do is say show the name, and I want it to show on the right-hand side. Next up, I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK. and we're gonna see that my name shows up right over here on the right-hand side. And just like before, I can also edit those properties further. If I wanted to be on a very specific point, I wanted my resistance to be right at 302, I can go ahead and change the beginning point right there. And I can also change the general appearance. If I always want it to be orange, keep it a solid line and make it a thicker line. We'll do 3. And we'll go ahead and save this as a default as well. Hit OK. And you can see my new resistance point right here at 302, and it's an orange line. If I were to create a new support resistance line, I would just click again, and it's going to look exactly the same as my new default layout. Just like before, if I wanted to get rid of all these, just go ahead and right click on one of them, clear drawing set, and hit yes. Now looking at my drawing tools again, those were the top 4. Again, the pan icon, the pointer, the trend line, and support and resistance. Those are going to be by far the most popular drawings inside of ThinkorSwim. Now, the next one, and we're not even going to discuss them because I can't see you using them ever, but the time level button just allows you to create a solid vertical line somewhere on your chart if you wanted to. So you can see I'm creating these vertical lines. If I wanted to pinpoint a specific time on my chart, I could do this. Let's go ahead and get rid of all those. The next one up there you're going to see is a text note. This one you could actually use from time to time. Now the text note simply allows you to add text to your chart. So for example, if you wanted to add a note right here for some reason, maybe this was another potential area of resistance, we could go ahead and click on here. We could go ahead and type in area of resistance. We'll go ahead and hit OK. And now you've got a nice little note on your chart to be aware of a potential area of resistance here. And you can also edit that just like before by going to Edit Properties, change the color, the size of the font, and you could even change the alignment. Maybe you wanted that to be on the right, so the arrow is going to be pointing to the right, the text is on the left. We'll go ahead and hit OK, and you can see it just flips around. Now again, you might use that one from time to time, and you may also use these next icons we're going to go through really quick, which is just the shape icons. If we wanted to throw an arrow on our chart to point out that top point, or maybe this point right here, or maybe down here at the bottom, you simply click to add the arrow. If you go ahead and right click on the arrow you want to edit, you could make that arrow bigger if you wanted to, the direction at which it points, and you could be hyper specific with the value at which it's pointing. The next one's up. You're going to see a little oval icon. This is if you wanted to highlight a specific section. So if we wanted to highlight this little top here, we could just click our 2 anchor points just like before. Do it again here, maybe down here at the bottom. And we could also edit those colors in the background. If we thought that the white background was a little difficult to see, we could go ahead and click on this gray color. We'll switch it to like this light pink. We'll hit OK. And that's the oval icon. Bring back up our drawing menu. You're going to see something similar, which is the rectangle. Just like before, we could click and drag exactly the same as the oval, except it's a rectangle. We'll go ahead and right click on it, edit properties. Just like before, we could change the color. We'll do yellow. And you've got a nice little highlighted box right here. You can keep track of what happened here if that's what you want to use this for. Again, to get rid of all the drawings on your chart, just right click on any of them, go down to Clear Drawing Set, and hit Yes. Now the next one up is going to be very similar to the trend line, and that's just a channel. And you're going to see it here in your drawing menu as 2 lines side by side. Now just like the trend lines, you're going to find 2 anchor points. So let's say we saw a trend right here. So top of this candle, bottom of this candle, we saw a downward trend here. What we do is go ahead and click on the top of this candle. Come down here, let's see, we grab as many of those high points as we can. We'll click again. Now this time, we're going to drag left or right to create the channel. So in our case, we're going to go to the left. And let's say we saw a trend right here to the downside. I'm going to try and grab as many of those low points as I can. Go ahead and click again. And now we've created a channel right here. Now something somewhat different than the trend line, we can go ahead and right click on these and edit the properties. You're going to see a few more options in here. A lot of it is standard. You've got the same left extension, right extension. You got your beginning and end points. What's really different on this one is these channel curve properties. And what this is going to allow you to do is add a midpoint or maybe like a 25% or 75% point between your channel. So for example, if we wanted a line going straight through our channel, center 50% of the channel, what we could do is go ahead and click on this little check mark box next to 0.5 coefficient. We're also going to change the color of that line just to make it a little bit more differentiated. We'll click on the color red here, make it yellow. And we're also going to make it a dashed line, again, just to make it stand out a little bit. Go ahead and click OK. And now we've got that same channel we had before, except now we've got a 50% line right in between the two. We made it yellow and a dashed line to stick out a little bit. Now, if we were to save that as a default going forward, anytime we created a channel, you're gonna have that same general appearance, all by default. So remember, each one of those settings that we save is specific to the drawing type. If we save a specific type of drawing for the trend line, it's not gonna carry over to the price line. The price line settings aren't gonna carry over to the channel settings and so on. It's drawing specific. Now let's go ahead and remove these just like before, clear the drawing set, and start fresh. The next one we're gonna talk about is going to be the regression line. It's a little line with the R over the top of it. Now regression lines are quite a bit different than the other ones we've been talking about. Regression lines are drawings that fit the given data that we select. So instead of clicking like a top or a bottom in order to create a trend line, we're instead gonna click a starting point and an end point. For example, if I click on this candlestick right here, you're gonna notice that whether or not I go up or down, it has no impact on the regression line. It's really when I go left or right is what's changing that line. And what it's trying to do is fit the data that we're selecting, basically the amount of time, the candlesticks that we're selecting, and it's really going off the mean of all of those points that we select. So trying to fit all the candlesticks in the best way possible. Now, as traders, if we were to see the price far above or below the regression line, and we believe in mean reversion, basically that the stock price will eventually revert to its long-term mean or average, we may be able to find some trade setups based off this regression line. For example, looking at this time period that I just selected, creating this mean regression line, you're gonna see that the price is well below that. Looking at this, we might be able to plan on the stock price coming back up to its mean over this time period. We might be able to look at the current price of Microsoft way down here and say, hey, if Microsoft were to revert back to its mean, we might see it push back up to the 301.79 area, right where that mean regression line is drawn. Now, if we were to add on this just a little bit, we'll go ahead and remove this drawing. The next drawing up is going to be the regression channel, which is very similar to the first one we just selected, regression line, except this time it's going to create 3 data points. Now, the line in the middle is still your regression line, but the line above and the line below are each standard deviations. So one is 1 standard deviation above, one is 1 standard deviation below, which again could be used to find entry or exit points, basically oversold or overbought levels. Now, if we selected this time period, we created the regression channel, we could see that up here, this could have been overbought levels. We might have seen the stock price revert back to its mean, drop back down in value. Same thing if we saw it hit the bottom of our regression line, that might have meant it hit an oversold level. We might have seen it pop back up, revert back to its mean. Now, those are the regression lines. Again, you can edit the properties. We could change that middle line if we wanted to, the regression line itself, change it to yellow, maybe make it a little bit easier to see. Or just like I told you before, standard deviation, we could change that coefficient. Right now it's 1 standard deviation below, 1 standard deviation above, but we could change that to 2 or 3 standard deviations if we wanted to. Whatever you find most useful. Now in our case, we're just gonna get rid of this and move on to our next drawing. And if we bring up the drawing tools menu, you're gonna see that the Fibonacci's are all up next. And there's quite a few of them, but to be honest with you, you're not gonna use the vast majority of them. Now the one that you actually may use, and one we're gonna talk about, is gonna be the Fibonacci retracements. So we'll go ahead and click on that one. It looks like a little percentage sign. From there, you get the little cursor just like before, the little pencil icon. And for the Fibonacci's, we're gonna go ahead and find on this chart that we're looking at an absolute low and an absolute high. So let's say I saw it here. I'm gonna go ahead and click on this bottom point of this candle, and I'm gonna come up to this high over here on the right-hand side and go ahead and click again. And on our chart, we now see the Fibonacci's. Now the Fibonacci's or Fibonacci sequence is really just a set of numbers that's been frequently observed throughout nature. You can see it in the branching patterns in trees or leaves. You can see it in hurricanes, seashells, and even galaxies. So the thought process here is, why not apply this to the stock market? Now you might be a little bit skeptical, and so am I. It's kind of hard to see how something that reoccurs in nature could be applied to something like the stock market. But there has been evidence to suggest that Fibonacci ratios do play a role in the stock market, and you could actually use them in your trading. And since they're so popular, I thought we'd go through them today. And you can see here that the Fibonacci sequence is being expressed 23.6, 38.2, 50%, and so on. Now, a lot of people out there don't actually want to see all of the Fibonacci ratios, so what we could do is go ahead and right-click on this drawing, and we're going to edit the properties. Down here below, you're going to see all of the Fibonacci ratios expressed, and they're all checkmarked, which means we're seeing all of them. Now, let's say we didn't want to see all of them. We only want to see the ones that are important to us, and in our case, we're going to get rid of all of them, but the 50%, 61%, and we'll get rid of all of these. We'll go ahead and hit OK. And we can see all of those other lines, all those other Fibonacci ratios get deleted. Now, you can also delete lines individually by simply right-clicking on the Fibonacci you wanted to delete. And we're going to go ahead and say hide curve 61%. Now the downside here is that you can't just right click on it and add that 61% back really quickly. You got to go back to edit properties, got to come back over to the checkmark box and recheck it in order to add it back to your chart. But that right click method before is a quicker way to do it. Now let's also say we wanted to change the color settings here, make it purple, and we're going to save it as the default going forward. So now the next time I do this, let's say I was to remove this drawing. If I click the Fibonacci's again, it's going to have all my settings saved. But you're going to notice I only changed the color of the actual line itself. If I wanted each individual color to be purple as well, I've got to go back to edit properties and change each one of these to that purple color. If I save it as the default again, let's say I was to delete this out of here, you could see that if I was to draw a new Fibonacci sequence, they all show up as purple, except for this one. I must have missed it. Let's edit the properties, make that one purple as well. And there we go. Now, the other ones on here, again, we're not going to really talk about them because I really cannot fathom why you'd want to use them. Maybe the Fibonacci extensions. It's very similar, except for the Fibonacci extensions, you're going to create 3 points. Let's say we create this bottom, this top, and this bottom right again. You've again got the Fibonacci sequence on the right-hand side over here. But you're going to see some of these other Fibonacci's are just strange. Like right here, you've got the Fibonacci time series. If we were to click here and click here, you're going to see the Fibonacci's, but expressed in time right here. So each one of these lines is a Fibonacci ratio, but going out in time intervals. If we get rid of that, you're also going to see the next one up here is the Fibonacci time ratios. Again, very similar, except this one you're going to see it does change depending on the time frame that we select. So going left to right, you're going to see that the width changes, whereas in the previous one, it didn't. If we get rid of that, you're going to see the next one up is the Fibonacci time extensions. This one, I suppose, could be useful in the same way the past one was, which is not useful at all, at least to me. Maybe I'm just not using these in the right way. But I cannot see why this would line up with time and find an entry or exit point based off time. It really just doesn't make any sense to me. Now, the rest of the drawing tools on here, I can truly never imagine you using. You're going to see here Fibonacci time series, time ratios, time extensions, arcs, fans, spiral, pitchfork, and the cycle brackets. They are there if you need to use them. We're not going to talk about them in today's video because I highly doubt you're ever going to use these. But if you need to, just keep in the back of your mind that they are towards the bottom end of your drawing tools section, and they are there for you to use. They can be edited just like we edited everything else in here. You simply right-click on the drawing, edit the properties, and then you go from there. Now, we've pretty much covered everything you should or could possibly need to know about the drawing tools in ThinkorSwim. I know we didn't get super deep into the Fibonacci's on there. It's just I really don't think you're going to use them. We did cover the different ways that you can access the drawing tools, whether that be through the little submenus or creating shortcuts. We also went through the drawing tools themselves and how to customize them, and we talked about how to save them as a set. If I did miss anything, or if you guys have any questions at all about some of the other tools on ThinkorSwim, please leave them down below in the comments. Also, if you guys did find this video helpful, go check out some of my other ThinkorSwim tutorials and maybe take a peek at my portfolio playlist. In there, you're going to be able to see some of the type of trading I actually do in my own personal account. I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day, try and make some money this week, and I'll catch you all in the next video.